Joining me now with more, Associated Press White House correspondent Zeke Miller. He's also a CBSN political contributor. Okay, Zeke, so we heard the president cite national security concerns. There was really no classified information. Is there grounds for a federal probe on this?
There's really no evidence of any crime being committed here. You talk to lawyers, they're saying there's no evidence to launch an investigation, even if the president wanted. There's maybe a reason to launch an HR investigation, but that's not really what the president was calling for there. And talking to White House officials yesterday, they sort of cast what the president tweeted and what the president told reporters aboard Air Force One as not an order to federal prosecutors, but just an expression of his frustration. We've seen him vent similar things about launching libel investigations or lawsuits in the past, and nothing has come from them. They say this is not an order, but it's still an extraordinary sort of thing to say about the Justice Department to begin with. But they're saying this wasn't a direction to the Attorney General. This is just the way the president likes to vent his frustration.
And is there a sense inside of what the mood is at the White House, and does the president have a sense of who he thinks it might be?
It's somewhere between defiant and despondent, really. There are a lot of people in the White House who agree with a lot of the sentiments expressed by that op-ed writer, not necessarily how those thoughts were expressed. And then there's also the sense of rallying around the flag, the sense that they're rallying the team together. They feel like they're under siege. And some people feel both of those emotions at the same time, talking to some people. And certainly the president is just irate. He wants to know who this person is. He feels he wants to root out the disloyalty in his midst. So that's really the challenge of this, sort of all these different emotions flying around. It's certainly a heated environment right now in the West Wing.
And I want to ask you also, turning now to George Papadopoulos, the president's former campaign aide who was sentenced yesterday in a court to serve time, 14 days in prison. I want to play a bite for you from an interview that he did with CNN, talking about a 2016 meeting potentially, Trump and Putin.
Senator Jeff Sessions was there too.
Yes.
At the table. What was his response?
My recollection was that the senator was actually enthusiastic about a meeting between the candidate and President Putin.
So you say that then Senator, now Attorney General Sessions, was enthusiastic about the idea of candidate Trump meeting Putin, but he has said the exact opposite. He says, he testified before Congress saying that he, quote, pushed back when you raised the possibility of a meeting with Russia. That's not true, you're saying?
I don't remember that.
Is this going to be a problem for the Attorney General?
It's certainly nothing new. We've seen this controversy follow the Attorney General, and one of the reasons why he had to recuse himself from the Russian investigation is that he had all those contacts with the Russian ambassador, which are normal for a senator, but he hadn't disclosed them publicly. That sort of led to that drumbeat that led him to recuse himself. The other concern here is that George Papadopoulos is obviously not the most credible of witnesses. He pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, was sentenced to 14 days in prison. If this were to ever go to a jury or something like that, he's not somebody who would be viewed very credibly. At the same time, there are a lot of conflicting storylines even within the Trump administration, people in those meetings about how that meeting did go down. So that's something obviously that special counsel's looking at.
Speaking of special counsel, any progress on a potential sit down with the president? Do we know if it's going to happen?
Well, it depends on which hour you ask Rudy Giuliani. He told my colleague John Lemire that there's really no way the president was going to answer those questions, and then walked that back just a few hours later. The president himself yesterday told some reporters that it kind of depends. He wants to make sure he gets a fair shake from the special counsel. There is a bit of a stalling game going on by the president and his attorneys. They want to push the special counsel probe into 2019. Their thinking is that if in 2019 Robert Mueller's investigating still the 2016 election and the things that came out of that, that's going to put him and his office in a very untenable position politically, if not from a legal perspective.
I want to turn now to President Obama, who has been so vocal yesterday, made a big speech at the University of Illinois, pushing back directly and naming President Trump. I want to play a bite for you from that.
What happened to the Republican Party? Its central organizing principle in foreign policy was the fight against communism, and now they're cozying up to the former head of the KGB. It shouldn't be Democratic or Republican to say we don't target certain groups of people based on what they look like or how they pray. We are Americans. We're supposed to stand up to bullies, not follow them. We're supposed to stand up to discrimination. And we're sure as heck supposed to stand up clearly and unequivocally to Nazi sympathizers. In a healthy democracy, there's some checks and balances on this kind of behavior, this kind of inconsistency. But right now, there's nothing. In 2 months, we have the chance, not the certainty, but the chance, to restore some semblance of sanity to our politics.
He said, what do you think of President Obama's speech? And I said, I'm sorry, I watched it, but I fell asleep. I found he's very good for sleeping. He was trying to take credit for this incredible thing that's happening to our country. If the Democrats got in with their agenda in November of almost 2 years ago, instead of having 4.2 up, I believe, honestly, you'd have 4.2 down. You'd be negative. You'd be in negative numbers right now.
Okay, we saw the back and forth there, Zeke. You know, much of, I should say, President Obama's speech really focused on also getting the vote out. But if he's trying to reach these independents, do you think that lecturing is going to help get them out? Or do you think it will mobilize these people who are kind of on the fence?
Well, you know, the meat of really both of those speeches, you look at the contrast, they're both about Donald Trump to a certain extent. Yes, Barack Obama was sort of saying, you know, if you're frustrated, you got to turn out to vote, made that appeal to the center, don't stay home. But Donald Trump's doing the exact same thing, sort of driving the fear, you know, the fear of economic collapse if Democrats were to take back the House. So there is, you know, both presidents, the current and the immediate past president, want this election to be about Donald Trump, and they're making very stark wagers here because they can't both be right. And so it really will be interesting to see over the next 60 days how that really shapes out. The president seems to be very confident in his own political coattails here. Democrats seem equally confident, if not more so, that the president's unpopularity will help them take back the House.
I want to also ask you on Capitol Hill, we were watching all week the hearings for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. There was a great deal of back and forth, a lot of drama from the Democrats on this. And today, Saturday, Senator Susan Collins came forward saying she's still undecided. Did anything change from the rhetoric that the Democrats pushed back? And is his nomination in any way in jeopardy, really?
His nomination really does depend on Collins and Murkowski, sort of the two moderate women Senate Republicans. And you know, if both of them were to withhold their vote, that could sink Kavanaugh. That would sink Kavanaugh's nomination, depending on what some of those red state Democrats do. That's sort of the interesting political calculus here as well. We don't really know what the Heidi camps of the world necessarily will do. The assumption is that they probably will stick with the rest of the Democrats and oppose his nomination. But you know, we could end up in a scenario where a Collins or a Murkowski were to withhold their vote, and a red state Democrat trying to win re-election in a very tough year for themselves would vote for that nomination. Obviously, we've seen Susan Collins sort of over the years sort of have a very be very protective of women's rights. Really on the Roe question, Kavanaugh had some really tough questioning on whether or not he really does believe that Roe versus Wade is settled law. That is the sort of thing that his nomination could hinge on, at least with her.
So bottom line, you think Kavanaugh nomination isn't completely in the bag yet?
Probably not completely in the bag, but it's still far more likely that he will be on the bench in a month than he is not to be.
All right, Zeke Miller, grateful you could join us here on Set New York.
It's great to be here.